as many people say, we are both a soul with infinite awareness and a tiny point of awareness. And the tiny point of awareness where our ego resides, telling us our narrative about what's going well and what's not going well in the world, is always making judgments about what's pleasurable, what's painful, what causes suffering, and what causes expansion. And from that point of view, yeah, things can really be difficult. If we can see a broader understanding, if we can take that view of the whole, which is our essence, we then begin to see that there's probably something we can learn from in that moment of pain and suffering that will move us forward in our expansion of knowing who we are. In fact, I think when we come into this reality, we take on the understanding at some deep level that, yes, we will be part of the polar pairs of opposite, from pleasure to extreme pain and everything in between, but it's because it's a way of knowing ourselves.
Hello, everybody. Have you ever experienced a coincidence that was trivial on the surface, but for some strange reason felt very important in your life, felt like it had meaning, some kind of meaning in your life? Then you have experienced what is called synchronicity, a synchronicity. Welcome to Mind the Shift, Marjorie Woollacott.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Anders.
I'm so glad you're here. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show. Now, the latest book you have co-edited is an anthology about synchronicities. And as far as I understand it and view it, synchronicities are one of the most important signals showing we're aligned with an all-encompassing consciousness, if you will. It's a bit like the universe is playing with us when we have these experiences. And that also happens to be the lovely title of the book, The Playful Universe. But before we go into that, I want to hear about your background and your journey. And having read your incredibly vast bio, I realized that there is an ocean of topics that we could talk about. I'll just try to summarize here. You are Emerita Professor of Human Physiology and member of the Institute of Neuroscience at the University of Oregon. You have taught courses on complementary and alternative medicine and meditation. You are research director for the International Association of Near-Death Near-Death Studies, IANDS, and are president of the Academy for the Advancement of Post-Materialist Sciences, AAPS. You are on the steering committee of the Galileo Commission, which is where we have been in contact to some extent. You were also a research professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Umeå, Sweden, the country where I live. And we talked about this a little bit before we started recording here. That was fascinating. And you've also worked or done research in France, in Marseille.
Right.
And your areas of expertise, according to your bio here, include changes in attentional performance skills associated with the mental training of meditation, spiritually transformative experiences, the development of musical performance skills in musicians. And you have published more than 200 scientific articles and written or co-edited 8 books. Your research as a neuroscientist is paired with your self-revelations about the mind's spiritual power. Now, that's impressive. Was that about right?
That's about right. I'm impressed that you have all of that down. Yes.
I just read it on the website there. So now this is the last thing here is fascinating. Tell us more about the self-revelations about the mind's spiritual power. Did you personally at some point have a spiritually transformative experience yourself?
I did. And I think that's what sort of shifted my journey in life from my rehabilitation neuroscience career that I had to what I'm really doing now. And so I'll just mention a little bit about it. Basically, when I was a young neuroscientist, I was told by all my professors that the brain was the creation of our consciousness, and that beliefs I might have had when I was young were simply not true. They now had the scientific facts, and I accepted that. And so I then was doing my research on simply trying to understand the physiology of the body until I was invited to a meditation retreat by my sister. And that was when I was just about 30 years old. And I was again, a materialist neuroscientist, a skeptic about things related to spirituality, but she had been studying with an Indian meditation master for a few years. And she said, look, it's your birthday. I was back in Virginia teaching at a university in Virginia. She said, come up for your birthday weekend and I'll give you a present. I'm going to give you this intensive meditation weekend workshop with this meditation teacher and see what you think. And she reminds me that I was skeptical and I said yes, then I said no, and finally I said yes again. And then I came. And the first morning of that retreat, we were told in the meditation center, just before the meditation session, we were told that this meditation master was going to come around and initiate every one of us there. And it was described as a spiritual awakening, and it was to happen through the Swami's touch. Now, clearly, I was a scientist and I was skeptical. I was a materialist, but I decided that I was here for the weekend. I would put my skepticism aside and I was curious to see what might happen. So as I was sitting in the room, I heard the meditation teacher coming closer to me. And when he came to me, what I felt was actually a touch on the bridge of my nose and between my eyes. And when I felt that touch, what I felt was a current of electricity that felt like a mini lightning bolt go down from that point where he touched me down into the center of my chest to what felt like my heart, but not the physical heart, but more like a heart than my physical heart had ever felt. And then that energy began radiating out from my physical heart through my body, beyond, feeling like pure love, feeling like nectar flowing through me. And the words that came to mind had nothing to do with my scientific analysis. They were, I'm home. I'm home. My heart is my home. So something happened in that moment that shifted me to a whole new awareness of a different part of my being I'd never experienced before. And I remember going back to my college position in Virginia afterwards and getting up the next morning at 5 a.m. to meditate. And I did that because I knew that underneath the surface of my awareness now simmered this quiet ecstasy that I had tapped into in that moment. And I've been meditating ever since because I realize now that's a new source of equanimity that's always there available for me. So that was that initiation of the shift in my reality system. And that then started this journey that went parallel with my research as a career member of a neuroscience community, but now exploring consciousness at the same time, and finally getting me to shift my career by, in fact, retiring a little bit early so that I could begin to study consciousness full time and really understand what is the fundamental nature of consciousness.
Okay, fascinating. Well, it seems to me as if, I mean, that was a fantastic story about how you had this spiritually transformative experience, and it seems to me it sounds as if you were fairly open to it when you were there, because I mean, as a truly skeptical person, a hard-nosed materialist probably wouldn't be open to that kind of an energy that you felt there. Maybe would have been scared or something, but it seems as if you were kind of opening up, although you had this physicalist worldview.
Yeah, well, you're right. And I should mention that I didn't tell you that the Christmas before that particular awakening, my sister and I had been down in Arizona at my parents' house, and there had been a plane crash over Southern California during that time. And I was frightened to death of getting back on the plane to go back to my university where I was. And she had said to me as she was taking me to the airport, and at that time you could walk up the sort of to the gate with the person. She said, Marjorie, I have something that may help you. And at that point, I was so frightened of the plane, I said, anything. And she gave me a mantra, which was simply the words Soham, which actually translate to I am that, I am consciousness. I didn't know that, but I just started repeating them as I got on the plane. And my anxiety went away when I got on the plane, and my white-knuckled feeling at takeoff went away, and I could look outside and see the clouds floating by and feeling totally in peace and equanimity. So I think that was the opening that made me curious. It's like, oh, something happened there. I don't understand it, but I'm willing to try a little bit more and see. So you're right. I think often it takes something like that to make a crack to make you curious enough.
Yes. I think that's an additional explanation that is good to have here, because I mean, it might happen anyway, but I know that some people get really scared and they are so skeptical they stonewall themselves in that materialist world. But it's fascinating that you've been able to study these phenomena, these esoteric phenomena, like what is consciousness and the non-material and non-physical reality that is obvious for those of us who are open to that, at the same time as you have been at universities. So how has that been? You mentioned that you retired early, but have you been able to pursue this kind of research in parallel with the more traditional, standard materialist kind of science?
Right. And so, first of all, I say retired early. That's sort of a joke because I went to half-time at the age of 64 and I finally retired at the age of 69. And for some people, that wouldn't be called early. But for many of us,
okay, so that's early in your world. Fascinating.
In my world, because I'm still doing all that happened was now I'm using my retirement salary to support me while I do this research full time on consciousness. And I love that. So, so yes, first of all, during that career, I also shifted, as you mentioned in my bio, to teaching courses on complementary and alternative medicine, because there you're actually trying to heal the entire body, the spirit, the mind, and the physical body. And I wanted my undergraduates that were going on into the field of medicine to understand there were more ways to heal than just through pharmaceuticals and cutting, as what we typically do now. And so I think what was interesting is they really opened up to that when I said, for your topic of this term, you're going to write 2 papers, and they're going to be on 2 aspects of complementary medicine. Like, for example, it could be energy healing. It could be, for example, homeopathic medicine, meditation, chiropractic. And you are going to look in the literature and show the evidence for or against the efficacy of that form of medicine. And they were shocked when they finally went to the literature and found that these have lots of data showing that they really help the well-being of human beings, including recovering from diseases. So that was going on during the university career. And also, I began in the last 10 years that I was there to bring in students that were interested in meditation to do research projects on meditation. And so that's where we began looking at, so what does meditation really do to the brain? Well, it increases our attentional focus. It makes us stronger in focusing our attention on a single point as we meditate on our breath, for example. But it also seems to allow an inhibition of the impulses that get in our way of living an uplifting life. For example, in that moment where something happens and makes you really frustrated, anxious, or angry, you have a way of pausing with meditation before you actually say or do something and think about what's the best thing to do or say. It's like your frontal cortex, which is more wise than your limbic system, your emotional system, steps in, you pause, and then you have a more appropriate response to yourself and to the people around you. So those are the things we began doing in my lab before I shifted more fully to looking at consciousness, really, and what is the fundamental nature of consciousness, because that's the heart of why meditation begins to work. We begin to let go of our feeling of smallness and separateness to a feeling of interconnectedness with everything else in the world.
Yeah. I try to meditate every morning. It's sometimes it's better than others, but I know what you mean. It is like that. It's like you're just part of everything. And the goal, I guess, is to stop thinking.
The goal is just, and when we say that, I also remember that
maybe not the goal, but I mean, that's actually what's happening when you enter into this.
Right. And I think it's like there are different levels of what I would call our creative process. And sometimes the thinking, as you and I are talking about it right now, is this narrative that I have going on all day long that's not helpful. It's just rehashing every conversation, wishing I had said something else. But we're talking about a higher level of awareness where you are actually able to connect with your intuition and the wisest part of who you are at your highest nature, and then let that flow through you. And I probably wouldn't call it thought either, but it's something akin to listening to our highest self and letting that then flow through our actions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the research that you did there and the work you did with your undergraduate students, I think that's wonderful, and more professors and associate professors and teachers generally should do that. And when it comes to the consciousness research, of course, these days, I mean, since a few years back or 10 years back or so, it's actually really opening up now. So, which is super fascinating to see what's actually happening here. So there are different competing theories about what consciousness is, and some of them are actually approaching the spiritual way of looking at things. Would you agree?
I would. And I want to mention two people that I often talk about now when I give presentations on the nature of consciousness. One is Bernardo Kastrup from the Netherlands, and Federico Faggin, who is from Italy. And Federico Faggin hasn't been so, what's the word, known in the past, but now he has written, I think, 2 or 3 books. The latest one in Italian will be translated into English. And he, as a physicist, combined with Bernardo Kastrup, really show us scientifically why seeing consciousness as fundamental is absolutely essential to our understanding of the universe, partly because what they both say is it allows us to understand that cooperativity with other people and other parts of the universe is critical for our survival as a species and the Earth surviving as we're going into these crises in the world right now. It's like just shifting to cooperation, and empathy and compassion will be a key factor for us as human beings. So I keep wanting to remind people that there are these others that are beginning to see the world as scientists in this new way, and hopefully they will spread the word to others.
Yes, I agree. So Federico Faggin and Bernardo Kastrup, two good names there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about a lot about the book, The Playful Universe.
Yes.
It's an anthology, and I think the contributors are mainly academics and scientists. Is that right?
Yes, they're mainly academics and scientists. And in fact, I'll just give you a little bit of a background about how I got there, and that'll sort of explain more about who's in it. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. So basically, I just want to mention again, I'm going to go back to my youth in a certain sense, because when I was young, before I went to university, I had this great sense of mystery and a feeling of the sacred quality of the universe, which perhaps many of us have when we're young. But then I was trained as a neuroscientist, as I mentioned, and according to that materialist worldview, there couldn't be a consciousness beyond what was created by the neurons in my brain. And so because of that view, the word synchronicity really had no meaning in my life at that point. And I thought that everything that happened was simply another word for a chance coincidence, if it appeared that it was meaningful. But then in my 30s, I had that meditation awakening in the retreat. And at that point, I found this deeper connection to my inner being. And as I continued to meditate, I saw my life transforming, probably as you're noticing with your life and perhaps the listeners too. And then what seemed like chance occurrences led me to wonderful new friendships and a new path in my career that in fact I'm following now. And so a few years ago, when I was invited by this group of scholars with David Lorimer in the Galileo Commission that were interested in the meaning of synchronicity, I was excited to join the group because I wanted to understand, what is this thing, synchronicity? And David reminds me that these conversations have been ongoing on and off since the 1990s in the scientific and medical network. So when I joined that conversation and looked back at my recent life, I found I had many synchronicities that were quite profound that had occurred since that first meditation awakening. And so I was profoundly surprised and moved by that. And so I began to see the specifics of the work of this mysterious force, I would call it, in the universe that seemed to be part of this infinitely interconnected consciousness that we're a part of. It's that playful aspect of our universe. And so in our synchronicity group discussions, we began to explore our own worldviews with each other as part of the volume. In other words, the worldview that would make synchronicity possible. And I realized that it would be wonderful to share our understandings, not just with each other, but by creating this volume. And so then, since I'm the president of the Academy for the Advancement of Post-Materialist Sciences, as you mentioned, the AAPS, and we edit volumes on such topics, I suggested to David Lorimer and Gary Swartz that we invite leaders in the field, as well as our group members, to contribute to the volume. And so what happened then is we have our group members, I think there were about maybe 15 of us, plus some other leaders in the field, including Roderick Main, Richard Tarnas, Will Keepin, et cetera, adding to these jewels of essays on their own synchronicities, what are their meaning for them in their lives, and what type of worldview supports the concept of synchronicity.
Yeah, do you think it's important that it is academics and scientists who are contributing to this, and will it enhance the possibilities for this book to spread?
It's a really good point, and I would say absolutely yes, and for two reasons. The previous volume that we published was called Spiritual Awakenings, Scientists and Academics Describe Their Experiences. And again, when people read that, people that weren't scientists or scientists said, oh my goodness, scientists have these experiences. Well, then they're credible people. I have to accept that they're saying something that is a real truth for them and has transformed their lives. And I think it's the same way with this book on synchronicities. It's like these are people that have studied in academia and in science all of their lives, and they are saying, look, these synchronicities are real and they have transformed my view of the universe. So I think absolutely this should have a good, strong impact on reminding people that these are not just people that are already spiritually oriented from the time they're children, but they have looked at the world from both sides, scientist and a regular person doing meditation in this case, or watching their own mind with synchronicities. And they're saying, I now believe this is a very credible phenomenon, and I see the way it acts in the world, and it supports the unfoldment of my life in a beautiful way in the world.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. People still have a lot of, they place a lot of credibility on scientists. So that's a good thing then, that scientists can tell about these things. And so I just briefly tried to explain what a synchronicity is early on in this episode. So what is a synchronicity in your words? Does still the old, Carl Jung's definition, because he was the one who, as far as I understand, who coined this term. Is that still viable, or would you have another different explanation?
Yes, I think that he definitely he coined the term, and I think that it's a viable term. But I'm actually going to even start a little further back than his coining the term, if I may, because I believe that the way he went about to study synchronicities is also important. And so if I can, I'm going to take a step back. And that is, first of all, to talk to you about another contributor to the book who was talking about Carl Jung. So when people buy this book and read it, they'll find that one of our contributors, Dr. Richard Tarnas, actually has a beautiful foreword in the book. And he has written in his own book extensively on the topic of synchronicity. And that previous book is called Cosmos and Psyche. And there he introduces synchronicities, and with this definition, he says they are observed coincidences in which two or more independent events having no apparent causal connection nevertheless seem to form a meaningful pattern in our lives. And what he notes is that on occasion, those patterns may strike us as being so unusual that it's challenging to believe that the coincidence was a result of chance alone. Like I used to say all the time when I was a young graduate student, oh, just chance. He's saying, no, they're too meaningful to just be that. And he says that's because the events give the clear impression of being carefully and invisibly orchestrated. I like that. Carefully and invisibly orchestrated by this playful universe that is actually joining with us in this co-creativity of our own future.
Yeah.
So that's certainly what I noted myself.
Wonderful. Well, we all have, I think, practically everybody has experienced a synchronicity of some kind. These coincidences that we call them, that kind of in an almost eerie way feel meaningful. And the interesting thing, I think, is that they doesn't have to be events or coincidences that are, that seem meaningful or seem, potent or anything. It's just very trivial things, often very mundane things. But it's more the feeling you have when you experience it that gives them importance, if you see what I mean. It could be that you're talking about something and all of a sudden you see that topic that you're talking about, you haven't talked about it for 20 years, and then you just glance at a newspaper beside you and lo and behold, the exact same topic is talked about there in an article or something. And it kind of feels like, wow, that was strange. So what's your comment on that?
I think it's absolutely true. And I think you're making the point that Partly it depends on whether we pay attention to that moment of synchronicity, and then we look at it and we explore it a little bit more for it to truly unfold in our life. When I was a young graduate student and didn't believe in them, those things would happen, and I would just brush them off and never take the chance to really explore it more deeply. And I want to say that maybe I can just add in something else that I found fascinating as I was beginning to work on the book on synchronicity, that Roderick Mayne, who's also one of our contributors and has written a lot on synchronicity, he's devoted his career in England at a university there to synchronicity. He talks about different phases in our human understanding of the universe over the years, moving from what he calls enchantment in early history to disenchantment with the start of our scientific revolution, which is still going on, obviously, to a new phase now that he calls reenchantment, where many of us are recognizing this profound entanglement of everything in the universe. Oh, there's my cat.
Hi.
Yeah, she says we're all interconnected, which was my next line. She's just showing that interconnection.
Yeah. So we're again realizing that life is mysterious, and there are mysteries in life that we
exactly. It's all we're doing. We're not going back to prehistory. We're saying, look, it is still mysterious, and that we have to let go of our incredibly robotic way of viewing the world. So we are all interconnected. And when I saw those words of Roderick Mayne's, I felt this incredible resonance. And I was thinking about my own life journey and how, as that young student in America, I had really bowed to that disenchanting power of my materialist neuroscience teachings in my courses in biology and psychology. And what I did then is I relinquished my sense of enchantment and my search for the sacred in life. So I took on board that worldview of my professors as the only acceptable view of a young scientist. And of course, it took me 12 years before another powerful and expansive experience opened me up to that possibility that the world was indeed enchanted. But that's what happened to me. I saw the re-enchantment in that moment when I had that new awakening. And so I think that event catalyzed the beginning of a new exploration in each one of us when we have some event like that in our life. And those synchronicities then become apparent in our awareness. And so I believe that this journey from disenchantment to re-enchantment has continued in my life to this day. And before I stop on that, I just want to mention that when I read Federico Faggin's story of his own journey as a computer inventor, creator of the microprocessor, he had a similar event happen in the middle of the night one time when he was struggling with trying to think about how computers might be made conscious, realized they couldn't, and was also feeling very much despair about the fact that he had now all the money and credibility and popularity in the world doing what he had been doing, and he was totally unhappy. And that was when this experience happened, sort of like mine in the middle of the night, awakening to this powerful sense of connection. And that's when everything shifted in his own life. And now he's writing books on consciousness being fundamental. So, yes.
Reenchantment, I love that. It makes life so much more interesting and fascinating, and makes you so much more happy. And I mean, not having that makes life so numb in a way. It's numbing. To not realize that there is a mystery out there.
Yes.
So a major theme of the book, the volume, is what kind of universe makes synchronicity possible? Is it that we are all living, as it were, in our own worlds, and in which certain events happen solely for us? Would you say? I mean, because those who don't believe that coincidences can be meaningful, that synchronicity can exist, they think that everything is just random. It's like we're just billiard balls, a game of pool where these balls knock on each other, and it's just random events, everything. And so, but these events seem to indicate that there is a universe for me, and there is a universe for you. And this sounds almost like solipsism, which is not where I'm going, but I don't know how to put it, but it's like the universe is for me and it is for you, and it is for all of us. Of course, we're all part of one all-encompassing consciousness. But in a way, these events are for me, and that's what you feel when you have this eerie feeling that this is meaningful. You have this kind of sense that this is what's meant for me, and others can say that, oh, you're just imagining. I mean, how could it mean anything for you? It's just random. It's just coincidence. But it seems as if We are living in our own individual universe, and these events are meant for us like breadcrumbs, telling us that, yes, you're on the right path. Continue there, go there, do this, or stop doing that, maybe. Is that how you see it as well?
I do it, but I think I might phrase it slightly differently, but it's the same thing. It's like if, as Federico Faggin, Bernardo Kastrup, and others, including myself, say, that basically there is a fundamental, infinite creative power to the universe that we are all a part of. In other words, we are points of consciousness within that universal consciousness, and we're all interconnected, we're all entangled, and we are each co-creating with others this universe that is really about knowing ourselves. I think Federico says that in his books. It's like, this is about the one consciousness wanting to know itself. And the way it does that is by creating all of these other points of consciousness so that it can look back at itself and say, oh, there I am. And now I can co-create with you. I can be playful with you. I can create this universe with you. And within that playful entanglement, we draw the situations to ourselves that are most important for unfolding our path in this universe so that we can know ourselves more fully. I mean, it's a beautiful, real concept of what's going on. And something I've also heard, which I now understand more deeply, is that our beliefs create our reality. We've heard that before, but in this case, it's a nuanced term that means that what I pay attention to in my life is then what I then allow to unfold in my life. So when my heart says, I have a deep desire for something to unfold in my life, and it's a truly heartfelt wish, then your beautiful entanglement with everything else in the universe allows the constellation of events to bring that forth because I paid attention to that in my universe. And this is, to me, a critical issue for my own life. It's like what I pay attention to is so critical to the joy in my life. If I pay attention to all of the drama in the universe, the political events, all of the things that are going on, it may, with my attention going there, draw me down into that drama. But if I listen to the drama, but then put it aside, and then come back to my own equanimity and my desire to help people unfold their own creativity in this world, I will create a different universe from this belief of what is important in my life. So I think that's critical to us right now. And in fact, I'll share one other thing, because like everyone right now, I have a lot of anxieties when I hear about the world situation, all those sorts of things.
Don't listen to the news.
Don't listen to the news, exactly. So I tend to read the headlines myself, but I realize that nevertheless, my friends talk about it, the headlines talk about it. And this is what someone said to me, which I love. He is actually a meditation teacher, and he's also a haiku poetry master from Zen and a Zenga painting master. And he said, Marjorie, he said, what one needs to do in this world is to shift from what he calls framework 1, which is our 5 senses telling us how only the sensory experiences are real and nothing else is real, to framework 2, which is the one where consciousness is fundamental and we're all interconnected. And it's about an exploration of a playful universe as we unfold our consciousness. He says, what you need to do is to try to shift more to that other framework. But he said, here's a phrase that will help you, which I use all the time now. It's a Zen phrase, and then he drew a Zen painting related to that phrase. It is, embrace tiger, return to mountain. Embrace tiger, return to mountain. And what he means is you embrace whatever is happening in the drama of life, you look at it, but then you let it go and you return to the peace and the equanimity of being in the present moment and realizing your interconnectivity. And you ask yourself, how can I help myself and others in this moment to expand my consciousness? And somehow what I learned from my friend, Jeb Barton is his name, this summer has helped me in those moments when I get caught in the drama. And he said, look, these are the essential parts of this vast consciousness, which is what Federico Faggin and others say too. He said, this universe is a trustworthy universe, and I am nested in love. And everything else beyond my creating this conscious expansion of who I really am is just drama, and I can let the drama go. And it's like, oh, I can let the drama go. I embrace it and I let it go. It's here and I let it go. And somehow that's part of the synchronicity then of saying, okay, I'm going to focus on the joyful synchronicities unfolding in my life and let the drama go.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I've been saying to people lately also and thinking myself that we live in the world that we believe we live in, which sounds like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to many people, but But when you think about it, it is exactly like that, like you're describing here. And this is exactly why we have this polarization and people who are, focusing on things that you don't even think about and are scared and whatever and see the world as going down the drain or whatever. They actually see the world. They actually live in a different world, as I see it. They do that. Yeah. And because, as you say, you draw in the thing. What you give out is what you get back. And so this is so fascinating when you realize that it actually works this way, that you can practice this and your life will unfold in a different way. Yeah. And of course, John Archibald Wheeler, the theoretical physicist, said that we live in a participatory universe. Already in the 40s, I think he said this, which was wonderful.
Exactly. A beautiful term to really think about. And because to me, participatory really means a cooperative. If we can make it a cooperative participatory universe, we will create the most beautiful thing in the world. And I want to say something else. I was just at a transpersonal psychology conference in Oxford called Eurotas, where yes. Chris Page, a wonderful writer, talked. And one of the things he said is that we are going through difficult times right now, as we have climate change and these other things going on. And he said, what we really need to do is shift towards seeing that we can only survive with cooperation and compassion toward each other and working together and letting go of the competition that our materialist worldview has created for the past 200-300 years or more. Shift now to cooperativity and care and interconnection, which is, again, this top-down consciousness' fundamental view that we're all connected together. So I keep remembering that as well, that now my primary goal when I wake up in the morning is, how can I serve this higher understanding of interconnection and compassion and love? Because, of course, when we give that out, as you say, it comes back to us as well.
Mm. Beautiful. So how should one then react or act on synchronicities when they occur, would you say?
I'd say value them highly and explore them and say, wow, and I think also show gratitude for that synchronicity coming. I think that one of the parts of the synchronicities in my life I'll explain on Thursday morning is how just writing my book, Infinite Awareness, The Awakening of a Scientific Mind, and talking to my publicist when she said, well, what do you want from this book, Marjorie? And I said, well, probably can't expect a bestseller, but I would like to go to maybe 3 or 4 conferences a year and talk with others about these things, about consciousness. And that heartfelt wish caused me to meet Gary Schwartz, who invited me to co-create the Academy for the Advancement of Post-Materialist Sciences. I then met through him David Lorimer, and then I was asked to be part of the Galileo Commission, et cetera. It's like one thing after another unfolded. And each time I felt incredible gratitude for this widening group of friends that I could play with in unfolding my universe and my understanding of consciousness. So I think a lot of it is the awareness, the gratitude, and then continuing to watch it unfold.
Hmm. When a synchronicity occurs, in some instances, at least, when they feel really profound, it feels almost as if time stops or time collapses in a way. So how do you see time? Do you have any thoughts on what time is? Because I think it's an illusion, but it has some meaning, some purpose, I guess, for us in this 3-dimensional world. But when we have these synchronicities and these spiritually transformative experiences, it's kind of like the time stops. So what is time? How do you see it?
So first of all, yes, I think now all of the modern scientists that are on the cutting edge, as far as I'm concerned, like Federico Faggin, Bernardo Kastrup, et cetera, say that within the vast consciousness that is the fundamental nature of the world, there is no time or space. And when it says, I want to know myself, and it creates the points of consciousness, which then start acting, they act then within a time-space phenomenon. So I think what happens to us in those moments when time seems to stop, whether it's in a synchronistic moment or a meditative awakening moment, it's literally like we've moved back into what Federico Faggin might call the quantum field of consciousness that is before the material reality is actually created. And I think that many of these scientists also mention that when you move back into that arena, you're able to look, of course, forward and backward across time, because there is no time progression like we have it now. And you can actually shift your whole like reality system when you're back in that world. And it reminds me of people that have near-death experiences. And when they are in that near-death experience state, they actually can see what's going to happen in the future, and they can see why things happened in the past. But literally, time disappears. I shouldn't say it disappears completely, but what happens is they see everything at once. And then, of course, when they come back to the three-dimensional world, then time opens up again and it plays out in our usual illusion, we might call it, in this world of moving forward in time and across space.
Yeah. Julia Mossbridge has done some research on this. She was on the show as well. And by the way, during meditation, something like that happens as well. That time kind of disappears or stops when you're in deep meditation. And I guess it's because of what you just said there, that your consciousness is kind of traveling up or in or out to this more primordial realm, if you will.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about what you think of the higher purpose for us being here. Do you believe that we have guides in a higher realm, or perhaps it is our own higher self that is guiding us? Do you think that we draw a blueprint before we're born and decide on a general life path that we want to pursue and on which we can have these synchronicities that we have are talking about here?
And that's a wonderful question. And I should say that my views on that have evolved as I've moved from the neuroscientist at the university through beginning to do research with a lot of other scientists on the exact questions that you're talking about. And I want to mention that when I first wrote my book, Infinite Awareness, and I visited Ed Kelly at the University of Virginia, who's been doing work in this area with his colleagues for a long time, he said, well, your book is fascinating, but it seems like you left out one chapter. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, mediumship, because he's done research on mediumship himself. And I said, well, I have to actually say that during my career as a neuroscientist, I felt mediumship was a little bit frightening because I thought about like negative entities in the world that somehow then I might get in contact with. And so I decided if I don't believe in it, it's not there and everything's fine. And he just laughed, but he told me about his own experiences. And then because of him, I began to look at the scientific research in the area on mediumship. And again, this communication from people, for example, our grandparents that are on the other side, or a child that died early and is on the other side, and how they communicate with us. And in fact, I wrote a paper with Chris Rowe in England on this topic about these spontaneous communications from the other side, from people that have died in our lives, from our family, friends, etc. And I suddenly saw the incredibly strong evidence that is out there, that is evidential, credible evidence about these people communicating with us, telling us things that we didn't know, that then turned to be true, that help solve our problems in the same way with things that we didn't know about. So we can't just say, oh, this was somehow my, subconscious telling me this. These are things that we wouldn't have known otherwise. So saying that, I do believe that there are beings on the other side that may be our ancestors, and they may be other benevolent beings like guides, as you said. And I know that, I interact a fair amount with Suzanne Giesemann, who is a medium who has worked with Gary Schwartz and others as showing her evidential mediumship abilities, and she's been then like studied by scientists, and she's very credible. And she actually communicates with a group that call themselves Sanaya on the other side. And what they are telling her about is a non-dual universe, just like Federico Faggin and Bernardo Kastrup and others talk about. So it's like they're simply trying through another path, we might say, in this case, Suzanne Giesemann, to share their own understanding of consciousness being fundamental and how we can create a more sustainable reality if we understand the cooperativity, the compassion, the interconnection that we need in this universe to get along. So my answer is absolutely yes. And I understand that if somebody only relies on their five senses, they're going to have a harder time experiencing those things. But I want to say that you probably know about Ian McGilchrist, that a lot of people talk about, who talks about the left and the right sides of the brain, and the fact that in our current scientific milieu, it's the left side of the brain that is the strongest one, which is analytical and looks at the senses only and puts everything into individual parts and makes it linear. And we're ignoring the right side of our brain, which is the holistic side that sees something broader than our five senses. So to me, what we're trying to do in asking ourselves, well, are the mediums of the world possibly correct? We might say, can I at least try to expand my awareness of my right brain thinking and then look at these things and see? And I want to say that it's important to understand that everyone basically can be absolutely right on and right off. It's like we're filtering through our minds. So I want to say that I don't want to say that it's absolutely, right or wrong what somebody says, but I said, listen. And as Indian philosophy says, basically choose your guru and filter your water with great care. Listen to the mediums of the world and also be discriminating in what you believe. That's all.
Mm-hmm. And those mediumship studies that you mentioned, are they in peer-reviewed papers?
They absolutely are. So yeah. I would say,
which is so fascinating. People don't know about this. It's there.
Yes. So what I always do, and I highly recommend any of your listeners go. In the United States, we can go to something called PubMed, which is our medical database. And I type in things like near-death experience, and up come all these papers that I wouldn't have known about if I hadn't really typed in that word. So you can type in mediumship, you can type in channeling, trance mediumship, etc. I did that with a friend recently because she wanted to do experiments on this, and she wanted to know what was out there. And she was shocked. She just hadn't opened up the database and typed in the words.
I know. I mean, speaking of, we live in the world we believe we live in, because if you never encounter these studies, these papers, this information, you of course you can live your life not believing anything of it, but it's there.
Yes.
And now there's also AI tools. You might know about Stanford's tool called Storm. I just recently ran into it because somebody posted something about it on LinkedIn, and you can. Again, you can, and it's an AI tool for finding stuff in peer-reviewed papers all over the world. So, if you type in a question, tell me the latest advances in the research on near-death experiences or something like that, and then up comes in 3 minutes you have a full report with headlines and everything and references. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a sidetrack. So when people feel that the universe is unfair, it's not only unfair to them, but to millions of others. You hear this all the time. This is an unfair world. Is that a fundamental misunderstanding, would you say? Or are they correct?
I believe it is a fundamental misunderstanding, but we all have it because, as many people say, we are both a soul with infinite awareness and a tiny point of awareness. And the tiny point of awareness where our ego resides, telling us our narrative about what's going well and what's not going well in the world, is always making judgments about what's pleasurable, what's painful, what causes suffering, and what causes expansion. And from that point of view, things can really be difficult. I experience it right now, as I said, when I listen to the news. But what I think people are saying is that if we can see a broader understanding, if we can take that view of the whole, which is our essence, we are in and of that whole, we then begin to see that there's probably something we can learn from in that moment of pain and suffering that will move us forward in our expansion of knowing who we are. It doesn't mean that we're going to ever be in this three-dimensional reality without ever having pain. In fact, I think when we come into this reality, we take on the understanding at some deep level that, yes, we will be part of the polar pairs of opposite, from pleasure to extreme pain and everything in between, but it's because it's a way of knowing ourselves, expanding our understanding of who we are. So that's what I keep remembering when something painful happens to me. Can I step back and can I remember that? Embrace tiger, embrace the pain, return to the peace of knowing who I really am and my interconnection with others. And I swear that when I focus on helping others, I feel my heart relaxing. And then it's like, oh yeah, I'm part of a whole and we can help each other. And then everything seems to calm down into a whole different space of equanimity.
Wonderful. Now, before we wrap this up, it's been fantastic conversation. I have this tiny little question. what is in your mind or in your soul, if you will? Why are we here? Is it to learn, or what's the
Absolutely. So, I mean, again, that's where I highly recommend people reading and or listening to the podcast with Federico Faggin or Bernardo Kastrup, because what they're saying is what I'm saying is, and what our book, Playful Universe, is saying is that we are here as the one to know ourselves, to actually understand who we are, and to do it playfully. I think that's the key issue. You know, when, for example, my parents died, there was this moment of suffering that I was losing this person I had loved all my life. But there was also, from a different point of view, realizing that they just left the stage and they'll come back another time and somebody else is going to enter the stage, you know, a grandchild or a great grandchild. And so if we can watch it as we're all here to learn, and yes, on this universal stage, different beings will come and they will go. There will be joy and there will be suffering, but it's all part of the expansion of the understanding of who we are. And it can be joyful when we look at it from that higher perspective.
Mm. Wonderful. Again, so Marjorie Woollacott, the book is called The Playful Universe. People, go and look it up and buy it and read it. So this has been wonderful. Where can people now go if they want to learn more about not just the book, but about you and the other wonderful, amazing work that you do?
Certainly my website, which is marjoriewoollacott.com. And also, if they simply type in the name Marjorie Woollacott under YouTube, et cetera, they will find a number of interviews where I talk about exactly what we're talking about today, all the different aspects of my research, et cetera.
Great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show, and good luck with everything that you do now, Marjorie.
Thank you so much, Anders.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.